Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 421, movie and or TV themed games.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation Podcast is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Upgrade your game night with a beautiful game topper. It will make a great addition to your game room and to each and every game that you play. Having two toppers in my game room has been amazing. The new mats that have come out are absolutely beautiful. Just absolutely transform your space and your games. Check them out, GameToppersLLC.com. You will love what you see.
We are the hosts of Meeple Nation. I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holliday.
I'm Logan Howard.
And I am Andy Holliday.
Check out our website, meeplenation.com. We have blogs, we have photos, we have links to past episodes. There are bios of all of us, including our bloggers. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out to us just to say, how you doing? You can do that at meeplenation@gmail.com. We would love to have you join us on our Patreon page. There's a link for that on our webpage. Gives you the opportunity to support us. If you like what we do, greatly appreciate the support. We've been doing this for almost 7 years now, and to this point, it's just been us. We would greatly appreciate you jumping over to our Patreon page. And once again, you can find that link on our website.
This week, we are discussing games that are based on movies and or TV shows.
Why is it just TV shows and movies and not books? Was Dave in charge?
Yeah, nothing that had to be read. Mostly because there wasn't a link for books based on board games on BGG.
And because who reads books anyways?
Feel free to throw in any games that are based on books as well.
Games based on movies and or TV shows. This is a pretty fun theme. We've talked off and on about different games that fall under this category. Nathan, if you follow the podcast, you know he loves a lot of those themes, but he's quite often afraid of how the implementation is. The first thing I want to ask is, do you guys have a favorite game in this genre?
I have a favorite that I'm most worried about,
Okay.
and that's Star Wars. So easy for them to monopolize it. Oh, we're just going to make a game, throw Star Wars on it, and sell a bunch of copies.
Okay. Favorite theme to go on those, right?
That being
Star Wars?
said, I really do like Star Wars Imperial Assault.
When they do it right.
Right.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's just something I'm most worried about when I'm going in.
Whenever there's a new Star Wars game out, right?
Yeah,
Like you're excited, but then you're also like, oh.
You don't know if it's just nerd tax.
Yep, exactly. And anything that's themed based on a movie or a video game, that is a legitimate concern that it's just a skin thrown over a mediocre game.
Before we go any further, because I'll forget if I don't ask it now, do you have a movie or show that you really would love to see them make a game out of?
So my all-time favorite is Big Trouble in Little China, which they did do a game for, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it here today. And another cult classic that I always really loved was They Live. I still haven't got my Kickstarter fulfillment for that, but they've done a board game based on that, so I can't quite talk to that one. I am excited for it. They Live Assault on Cable 54 in the past, whenever this subject came up, that I always wanted a really good G.I. Joe theme game or Transformers theme game. Growing up was a big part of my youth. Run home from school, that was what you watched. Also, during that same time, for me anyways, was you wake up early so you could watch Robotech. Those IPs now have had games that have come out that reasonably reflect those themes. The G.I. Joe deck building game and the Transformers deck building game have both been fair. They've done them really well, not ones that are hitting our table all the time, but they're still games that are fairly well done. There's been a couple of renditions of a G.I. Joe game in the past. In 2016, there was Venom Assault. It actually followed the original 80s cartoon fairly close. They didn't have the rights to the G.I. Joe, so it's G.I. Joe that you'd find at the dollar store. Yeah. So they're off-brand. The game was still done fairly well. It followed a lot of the episode arcs. Still just didn't really give that hoorah feeling to it, that jump for joy that it was a G.I. Joe game. Also coming up, Renegade Games has a new version of G.I. Joe that actually looks pretty good, and that's G.I. Joe Mission Critical. What excites me about this game, as we talked about previously in our March news episode, is a G.I. Joe miniatures game.
Ooh.
The opportunity to not just have G.I. Joes, but you have miniatures. It's another cooperative game, which I think as G.I. Joe it should be, unless you have a team game. G.I. Joe Mission Critical is something I'm looking forward to. So I'm hoping they do it well. Renegade Studios did G.I. Joe deck building. That was a fair game. This one I'm looking forward to even more. I mean, I was really looking forward to this G.I. Joe deck building game when it came out. The idea of G.I. Joe miniatures, looking forward to this.
The only thing that worries me here, not worries, I don't know if that's the right word. Anyway, it's G.I. Joe. Gotta have the miniatures resemble G.I. Joe's really good. In fact, if they don't have moving arms or something, I don't know if I'm going to be satisfied.
If they don't have the Kung Fu grip.
To me, would put it so over the top. They have these miniatures, and they do a really good job of reminding me of my old collection. Andy, Logan, have anything that you are hoping to see? Like I say, not even necessarily hope, but something that get you excited.
A John Wick dungeon crawl.
Ooh, nice. Yes, that would actually be pretty cool.
I think that'd be awesome.
I think you'd have a lot of people on board with that. I've never seen any of the John Wicks, but I bet you would have a lot of people on board with that. I see a lot of memes about John Wick's dog.
Yeah.
But that's a really good question, Dave. I would appreciate something from Brandon Sanderson's Way of King, something in that universe. And I think it would have to be more of like a Descent type game. Campaign, fantasy.
So we're talking about these themes that or properties that we would like to see come out. Back in my youth, I watched the Aliens when that first came out, whatever the third Alien movie was called. But I was never anxiously looking for an Aliens game. But then we had Nemesis came out, and Nemesis is an outstanding game that isn't based on...
If you didn't hear his air quotes, there were air quotes.
Right, not necessarily following the storyline.
Follows some of the storyline, but wasn't necessarily based on aliens. They didn't use the term aliens, but it's totally based on aliens. Much like Venom Assault is very much oriented in G.I. Joe, but
Right.
It doesn't say G.I. Joe in it at all. Nemesis was a great game. It was done very well. Gale Force 9 also did an aliens game based in the aliens theme. But the funny thing is, I don't even consider looking at it because it doesn't compare. I mean, it might compare, but Nemesis shines so bright for that theme, for that niche. And Gale Force 9 does a great job with their games. But it's just one that I've completely overlooked because Awakened Realms did Nemesis so well.
And I don't know if it's just me, but I'm more inclined to be drawn towards games like Nemesis that don't have the official theme to it. In order to sell the game, they actually have to create a good game instead of throwing a skin on it. Now, that doesn't mean that because it has that theme, it's going to be a bad game. I'm typically drawn towards games that don't have that. In fact, it's more of a deterrent for me. If I see something that's Star Wars themed or has some sort of theme to it based on a movie or something really popular, I'm usually really skeptical and I don't just jump on it. Tend to do a lot more research, dive into whether it's actually worth spending the money on. Far too often been burned several times thinking, oh, this is a Lord of the Rings game, this is going to be amazing, and it was terrible.
It's a game that we're going to talk about later in more detail, but Harry Potter, the Hogwarts battle, that was total risk for something like that.
Absolutely.
But it was a fantastic game. Because you run the risk of that in any board game. Recent Kickstarter I got. Thought it was going to be fantastic. It was Cthulhu. There was great looking cards. It was fancy Phase 10. And that made me really sad. I dislike Phase 10.
So that means you didn't research the Kickstarter very well?
No, probably largely my fault. I should have looked at the gameplay a little bit more.
If I wasn't guilty of that, I'd make fun of you, Logan. There's many a time that I think, oh, that looks good. You see a couple pictures and well, that's enough. I'm convinced I'm going to back it. And then you get it and you're like, what in the world is this? This game is going straight to the coal pile.
Not that it's a bad game, and I think they did a great effort with it. But it's something that you run into getting a bad result so much easier with things that are popular based off of franchises, licensing. Sometimes they can just view it as a shortcut just to make money and not polish it. Like, I agree with you, Andy. If something's not, but it's similar, chances are they put more effort into polishing it than they did about trying to get the licensing rights.
We talk about these games, like you mentioned, Logan, where they just put the skin on a game. And one game that is notorious for that is Monopoly. So there is over 1,400 variants of Monopoly out there.
Holy smokes.
At least.
I don't think that's a complete list at all, because We have one for my company at work. I don't know if it's just something that they special ordered for the 50th anniversary or, whatever, but we have a Cache Valley Electric Monopoly at the office.
There's a lot of cities like
Right, Ogdenopoly, I know, is one.
We have a Riverdale one at the local Walmart.
there's a lot of these skins that are just thrown on Monopoly games. And to go back to the original comment that Andy, you were talking about Star Wars games, and I enjoy Star Wars. Star Wars is bigger into my childhood than G.I. Joe and Transformers was. Those were live action, amazing movies I continue to still seek after and enjoy. But Star Wars, there are over 700 different Star Wars games. You look at Monopoly, well, it will slap anything on a box, or you look at Star Wars that will allow that property to be slapped on anything. There's games that are out there. There's great Star Wars games and there's bad Star Wars games. And I've been burned by other themes that I like. Big Trouble in Little China, where originally came out Big Trouble in Little China Legendary Encounters, I was very excited for. I called that game very quickly. Then there came Big Trouble in Little China, the game, which was outstanding as far as a game that takes the property and translates it to a game that works, that makes you feel immersed into that. As you mentioned a while back, Andy, when we were talking about miniature games, how miniatures allowed the game to be more cinematic. And I think Big Trouble in Little China nailed that. And then you look at some of those Star Wars games that have been flops, and some of those Star Wars games that are just slapped on a box. And Logan, like you mentioned, people are paying that nerd tax to be able to have that Star Wars game. But then you have some amazing Star Wars games, like you mentioned earlier. The first of the episode, Andy, was Star Wars Imperial Assault. And for me, that is probably one of the, if not the best Star Wars game that I've played.
I would think it's a tie between that and Rebellion.
And Rebellion's really good, too. We talked about miniatures several episodes ago. The little miniatures that are in Star Wars Rebellion are cool. There's something about the miniatures, also relating back to that G.I. Joe Mission Critical game. The miniatures are cool. Miniatures are cool. And they don't necessarily have to be based on, like, much of Imperial Assault is not based on those key characters that are in the movies. You have those packs that will include Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, but most of it you're dealing with the heroes that are non-main characters that are not in any of the cinema, any of the material, any of the movies or the TV shows that are out there. You have that opportunity to develop and immerse that character. But Rebellion is a great game. Very much enjoy Rebellion. And I also enjoyed Legion. But Rebellion and Legion are two-player games. Really never see the table.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is there are a lot of limiting factors. I mean, that can come for any game. They've done a great job with those games as far as those are games that you love. But like you say, they're limiting factors, right? Because it's a two-player game, takes up a ton of space, and it takes a lot of time. It's hard for it to get around and come to the table. That's where I like some of the other games that we talk about, because it's a lot easier to experience what you love about those games.
You say limiting, and I guess that's limiting to our group, because there are people that it's just two-player games for them. That's perfect for them. But for us, very rare game nights where there's just two people here.
But give a quick shout out the Game Toppers you were talking about earlier. That's one of the great things about having Game Toppers set up, is if you want to play your Legion, you have it set up, leave it set up on one Game Topper while you play something else on another.
We used to leave Gloomhaven set up on this table while we would play everything else on that table, and we'll probably get back to that once the topper leaves, so that we can just leave Gloomhaven set up underneath, put the leaves on top of the topper, record on it, play something else on it. And that's unique to us. It's not unique to everybody to have that opportunity to have space where you could leave a game set up for weeks, months at a time. There's a video that Logan shared with us about this guy who was really big into Nemesis, established and 3D printed, and had a fog machine for this table that was all Nemesis. You don't take that down, right? That's like a permanent addition to that room. But Nemesis was his game. Nemesis is something that he very much enjoyed, and so he dedicated all that to that.
I would very much like to be his friend.
Yeah, he makes a note in the video that when somebody asked how much he had spent on it, and he's like, yeah, I don't like to talk about that.
So, and just a shout out, that wasn't me who found that video. That was Kit.
Oh, that's right. That was my brother Kit.
Yeah.
One of our bloggers.
Sometimes games, they're not even bad when they're franchise licensed or whatever. I remember playing Mistborn House War. So Mistborn is a book series by Brandon Sanderson. They had the game, The House Wars. it was just a weird premise for me. It's not that the game wasn't really polished, it's just they took a weird angle about it. So in their world, the Mistborn is this coming character to tear down the old society. Well, during the game, you can influence whether or not the Mistborn, if she succeeds or she fails. But at the same time, you're trying to position your house that if she fails, you were the furthest away, you weren't supporting her, and then that's when you get the most victory points. But then if she succeeds, you were the one that was supporting her the most, and so your family would rise and fall with that. It was just a weird premise because you weren't playing the good guy, and nowhere in there is there the good, noble intentions for it. It just kind of felt off. Even when you got a more polished, it's just kind of weird concept sometimes that people get lost in the woods. Because Steelheart Reckoners, I think, did fantastic with Reckoners, and I can't wait for the expansion to come out. It's really a crapshoot is really what it is, because even if they put the effort through, not just put the skin on, doesn't mean that it's a great game. But I mean, that's it is with everything, right?
One of the things overall, I guess, in this topic is an area where it's worth a little bit of a stretch. If you have that theme that you love, that movie you love, I think it's worth a stretch, and hopefully they did a good job, because quite often they do, quite often they don't. Like you say, it's kind of a crapshoot. This is one of those areas where I think quite often it can be worth it, just because if it really is that big a deal to you, do it, go for it, and hopefully it's something that you're going to love.
The issue with that is when it's an expensive game.
Right.
When you've got a huge financial commitment to a game, we'll maybe move this over to the video game themed games as well. I backed Skyrim. Hopefully, when it actually releases and they get the game to us, it's as good as I hope it is. I've mentioned this on the podcast before. Skyrim is my all-time favorite video game, and I really hope they did the board game justice. I really am concerned that they didn't, and that I spent a fair bit of money on a crappy game with an awesome skin.
That's the risk, especially when it's that property or something that we're invested in. Like you mentioned, Skyrim, near and dear to your heart, as I've talked on of Star Wars, Transformers, G.I. Joe, Big Trouble in Little China. And there's other games out there, like there's been a flood of Dune games, which is kind of ironic to use the word flood with Dune. There's been a surge of Dune games, going back to what you were saying, Logan, about the Reckoners and Mistborn. We have games like Dune Imperium, involved with more of the lead characters, where you have Doom, a game of conquest and diplomacy, which is a remake of an older Dune game, which has more to do with the surge and the power and control of Arrakis. And then you have Dune House Secrets. And there's other games that have kind of followed that. Game of Thrones, there's been several Game of Thrones played at that different angle. Game of Thrones Oathbreaker, Game of Thrones board game.
Yeah, I think it was just a Game of Thrones. But it was the Risk-like board game. They did fantastic with it. I want to say it was a great game. But then it was much older, so it was probably based off of the books than the movie.
It was before the HBO series, but there is those properties they can do a very good job at, and then they can do a lackluster job at. You brought up Risk, Logan. Risk is another one that loves to just put a skin on that game, sell another Risk. Risk is another one that, looking at our collections combined, that I think, Andy, you have a Risk Star Wars game.
I do. I have a Lord of the Rings Risk game as well.
I have Risk.
You could ask me how often I've played those or how long it's been since I've played either of those.
Did you get them as a White Elephant gift too?
No, I actually bought those. But it's been a long time. We're talking probably close to 20 years since they've been played.
I only purchased mine for memory's sake.
Repurchased a classic version?
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of the games like that, they've been pillaged for components for games that we've created.
Right.
And whatnot, because they're just never going to get played. So,
I mean, I've done the same thing with my Star Wars Monopoly, taken miniatures out and played Cosmos Genesis. Corey had set that up before we got here, and lo and behold, there were some of those Star Wars Monopoly markers that he was using as placeholders to track the age and the rounds that we were in.
There's one that we haven't really talked about, one franchise, I guess should say, Lord of the Rings. With Amazon's new series coming out, I bet you there's going to be a rash of new Lord of the Rings games.
You are probably very right about that.
That is another one that had mixed successes with.
Go back to the same thing. You just got to do your research. You make sure that it's looks like something that is actually going to be fun to play. There's another theme we haven't talked about, and that's Star Trek. Actually played and ended up buying, because I actually liked the game, was a Star Trek. It was a Star Trek deck builder game. I still have it. I haven't played it in a while. But I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun. gaining the different characters. You have a ship, you can gain different ships during the gameplay.
Was it the one from Decipher?
I think Star Trek is one that I would like to see a good game or two come out that would be fun.
I have Star Trek Frontiers over there on the shelf that's been there for a little while that needs to be taken out of the shrink wrap.
That Star Trek game, Nathan, is actually one that I would be very interested in playing.
The Star Trek Frontiers?
Yeah.
Brought up your Star Trek card game. What originally kicked off our group was getting together for a Star Wars customizable card game tournament. As we developed and that group grew, Decipher, which was the company that kicked out that game, also was producing a Star Trek customizable card game. Dennis, your cousin, was one that was really big into that. Just was cleaning up some stuff and came across some of those cards the other day, and I thought, bust that out and try to play that again sometime.
That was fun. I
really
enjoyed that game.
Thought Decipher did a really good job of it. But those tournaments that they had was kind of the nexus that brought our group together. It introduced me to Corey, introduced me to Brent, all of our group coming together, Everett. And as that group has waxed and waned, faces have changed. If it wasn't for Star Wars customizable card game, we probably wouldn't be sitting here having this discussion right now.
Star Trek, right?
Star Wars.
No, it started
Oh,
with
it was
Star
Star
Wars
Wars.
and then
Right, right,
expanded
yeah.
to Star Trek.
Yeah.
And then it expanded to Young Jedi, and then it expanded to Lord of the Rings, and then I think Decipher lost his property rights and shriveled up and died. I don't think they ever did anything after that. Star Trek, there's a couple of games. There's a Star Trek 5-Year Mission, which is a dice rolling game, which has been fun to play in the past. Star Trek Ascendancy, it ate up a lot of real estate. You start off with your own faction and go and you explore. You're going to find systems and you're going to find resources to use. Pretty soon, your systems are going to be interfering and running into Klingons. You're going to run into Romulans. The Borg are out there that you have to watch out for. A game that I really enjoyed, but it was one of those games that it just took too long. The more I played with, it really bogged down. Just mostly that it ate up so much table space that it was very difficult. If I had 2 Mycrofts, that gives you a lot more table space than what I had here. When I first played Star Trek Ascendancy, that was before I even had my Watsons. You could make it manage on the Watsons for sure. Having that 4-foot wide table space makes a big difference. So,
If I had a nickel every time somebody said, if I could be like Andy, oh my gosh, I'd have a nickel.
Hey, Dave, I don't think we ever went back to your original question, so I think this is time to bookend it. What game would you be looking forward to from a franchise?
I was thinking about that. I don't know for me, but I was thinking something that might be cool. And I know there are some, I know I've seen like a Murder, She Wrote like game, but I don't know that that's really a gamer's game at all, right?
Oh, wait.
Did you just say you wanted an Angela Lansbury game?
Hear me out.
Wow.
Hear me
Murder,
out.
She Wrote, Dave. Wow.
Hear me out.
Not what I expected.
I'd like to get my mom to play a game with me. And
well,
so
you are her grandpa now, so
it's true. That's true. I am over the hill and I'm a grandpa. I was thinking about that. And my dad actually listened to the podcast for the first time the other day. It's about time. And he was talking about it and he was telling me, things that he liked and everything. He's like, I didn't have any idea what we were talking about, but he really enjoyed it. If there was a good Murder, She Wrote game or a good Perry Mason game, I might be able to get my mom to play games with me, which would then maybe get my dad to, probably not. But but I think something like that to get some of my family into the hobby, and then maybe they'd listen a little more too.
With a Columbo expansion.
Columbo, yes, good call.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind like Monk, Burn Notice, get something like that, White Collar.
Yeah, I was thinking White Collar actually. There's some great shows. I just don't know what the game would be like. I don't know the implementation of that and how you would make it a good game more than just the skin.
I'd recently run out of things to watch on TV. So in
How?
You finished Netflix?
You finished the internet?
I finished the things that I want to watch. There's a lot of things on Netflix that I think are pure rubbish.
Did you watch Star Trek?
I haven't finished that, no. But
So
that's
lies.
something that I watch with my wife. But something I've watched on my own, now that I have to edit all this garbage out. So a show I've been watching recently is an older show, but one that has blipped on my radar is Stargate, a show that, especially the first couple of seasons, pretty darn cheesy.
This is the original Stargate.
Based off the original feature film, then Showtime did an extended film of it, and then it turned into a series. Started on Showtime, then was canceled from Showtime and was revived on the Sci-Fi Network. It's kind of funny that it was on Showtime where they probably had the bigger budget. It was pretty cheesy and pretty lame. Special effects were dumb. Moved over to the sci-fi and got better. As we were preparing for SaltCon Spring earlier this year, in the SaltCon Facebook group, there was somebody that was talking about that they were running Stargate game. And I was like, ooh, I should check that out. And the Stargate SG-1, which is the series I'm on right now that I'm watching, 2 to 6 players, and it's got an overall rating of 2.4 on BGG. So not one I'm going to be rushing out to buy.
Ouch.
Yeah, not one I'm going to be rushing out to buy anytime soon. Some people, they love that. It's a thing that they love. Talk about all the games that are these themes that some of them are great, some of them are duds. And that's the other thing, is that sometimes some of those duds are somebody else's diamond in the rough.
Totally.
That's actually, I spaced it earlier when we talked about it, but a suggestion I was going to make, if you have a thing like SaltCon, a game convention around you, that'd be a great time to try one of those games without pulling the trigger.
Absolutely.
Not that you're likely to run into a Skyrim game at SaltCon that you can sit in on and see if it was worth the money. But there's got to be a lot of those games where we're like, oh, I've heard about this. Oh, I read about it, but I was like, kind of, sit down and play it. Just see how it goes.
Conventions that we attend, SaltCon, BGG, both of those have a large library that you can check games out and sample those. You're absolutely right, Logan. That's a great opportunity to try those.
And people bring their own games. And so then if you just say, hey, I've been wanting to play this, who knows? They might have an open seat. Sit down. We'll teach it to you.
Again, both BGG and SaltCon offer that opportunity to reserve tables, to host a game. There's opportunities out there to take advantage of learning some of these games. But then at the same point, you got to do some of that homework so that you can not sit at the whole convention reading rules.
What sort of loser prepares?
Guess I do.
Thanks for joining us on our little stroll down TV land lane.
We've talked a lot about a bunch of different games based on TV and movies, even video games and books. Some that we've liked, some that we haven't liked so much, and some of the concerns we've had with particular genre. If there are any games that you love that are based on movies or any theme like that, let us know. If we've missed something, or if there's something we've talked about that you really love, let us know on our Meeple Nation Off Air Facebook group, or email us, and we'd be interested to hear your opinion.
Until next week.
We'll see you sitting on the couch watching your favorite rerun at the game table.
As always, we want to thank you for listening.
Check out our website. We have all sorts of cool things there. Love those blogs. Get a deeper look into the writing side of Meeple Nation.
Join our Facebook group, Meeple Nation Off Air. I look forward to seeing you there.
Follow us on Twitter @MeepleNation. We also have Instagram.
Under the same name. We also want to thank our sponsor, GameToppersLLC.com.
We love their product, and they have so much goodness out there.
And we also want to thank Rating Detergent for our music.
Check us out on our webpage, Meeple Nation at
Why is it always the website?
I don't know.
Or the email address, I mean. It's always the
It's
email.
always the email.
It's
yes.
always the email address.
Check out our webpage, Meeple Nation.
What is it?
Goodness, Dave, did we sit in the wrong seats? Is that what it is? Feel free to throw in any books, games,
Book-based
any-
board games?
and all those games have had those IPs have now have had.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite series.
You're such a dork. It's not a movie. Like
Not yet, Dave.
how
It's
do-
not a
how
movie.
Do you even know?
Okay, never mind. It will be one of my favorite
Oh.
series when the movie comes out.
Depends on who brings it to light.
Who directs it? I'm not super picky.
Earlier this year through the SaltCon Facebook or the SaltCon. Dang it, I am having a tough time tonight. That's the whole 20 minutes at the end of the episode is going to be all me going dur dur dur.
That was pretty fun talking about a few of our. That didn't even sound very fun. I'm not even gonna go with that either.
What about
So-
That was fun, guys.
what
Thanks
about
for
a
noticing, Eeyore.
heartwarming this time on Meeple Nation podcast?
Next week on Meeple Nation.
Well, there's Sean Connery again.
That was totally not Sean Connery.
Oh,
There was no
okay.
Scottish at all in that.
All right, whatever.
Yeah, okay. But on a very
Um,
special Meeple Nation where Dave struggles through the sponsor.
do do do. All right, somebody else go.
Well, that's just like the after school special,
I'm
like
done now.
this week on Blossom.
This week on Blossom. That's it. Answer to the question. Blossom.
Wow.
Mic drop. Game
Don't
designers.
drop that mic. That's
Get-
expensive.
I think you were much closer with Murder She Wrote because I would love to sit and watch Dave play Murder She Wrote too with a straight face.